morning. Hi, it is Stacy. This is Loving My Veteran and walking in my shoes this morning. I wanted to give a big shout out to everybody and say good morning and welcome. I have to do the housekeeping stuff because that's what I'm told to do from now on. We're going to talk about avoidance and unpacking that bag of avoidance. Before we get started, we have a lot going on. Good morning, Stephanie. Good morning, Sunny. And I need to talk to both of you this morning at some point too, so I'll message or call you. But as usual, I need to put this out here. We are not professionals. This is not professional advice. If you're in a crisis, please reach out for somebody who can help you. And everything that is in this video is copyrighted to Loving My Veteran and Walking in My Shoes, now that I got that out of the way. Don't forget, tonight we have Let's Talk. It is a great time. We learn a lot, bring a lot of people in, and just a time for us to be together as a family and as a community. So I just wanted to send that out to everybody. We have a very fun-filled, full-packed thing going on. We're going to have a board meeting that's going to just really take us to the next level. Michelle and I will be making our podcast go live next month. We are so excited about that. That way you can take us on the go if you need to. And we need to do a girl talk so we can have those for March as well. So with that being said, we're going to talk about avoidance. I roll my eyes because I just think that's like the topic of all topics. A lot of times with our veterans, we find that they avoid the issues. They avoid things. And they're taught in some of their therapy that they have toolboxes to work with. And we hear that a lot, that they have this toolbox. And it gives them the coping skills. And so early on, Carl was talking to me about his toolboxes and how he does things, more to Michelle, how he puts things in his toolboxes. And his toolbox lets him compartmentalize everything. And then he opens the box and deals with what's in the box or process it. And then when it gets overwhelming, he puts a lid on it and puts it back. And for a long time, I felt like he had these great boxes stuck everywhere, but they were filed under a master file called avoidance. Because when things got rough, we just didn't deal with them. So it didn't matter what it was. He filed all of his little stuff in his little boxes and compartmentalized the way he needed to. And then he put that box back on the shelf, but that box went into this big box called avoidance, and we avoided everything. And it drove me crazy. It was like, okay, so we're just going to go through avoidance. They have a lot going on, and so they just file this under the box of avoidance. Well, the more our relationship has progressed and the more I have learned, we also use that box of avoidance. I can remember when I worked in the corporate world and the upper management was coming to visit. If you've ever seen my desk, I'm organized, but it's chaotic organization. I get OCD to an extent, but I have chaotic organization, okay? And so I would have these piles everywhere of stuff I was working on. Well, when the corporate people came, I had this emergency drawer. And this drawer should have been labeled avoidance, right? It was things I didn't feel like getting to at the time. I would open the drawer and set all my files and all my papers in it, and then I closed the drawer back and my desk was all clean. And I'm like, instead of addressing each issue, I filed it in my box of avoidance. So as we progressed in our relationship, I realized that by not addressing the issues in our relationship, things that came up because I didn't want to trigger him, or I didn't want to deal with that conversation that day, or I didn't feel like it was important enough to handle, I also filed it in my own box and put it in my master drawer of avoidance. And you can't grow a relationship when you avoid the issues. Okay? You can't do that. Yes, they're they're compartmentalizing their avoidance and filing it under avoidance. It's not necessarily that they're filing it under avoidance, it's their coping mechanism. It's how they cope and deal with things. When they're overwhelmed, they have been, remember, broken down, reprogrammed, rebuilt, and they had to keep a lot of things when they were on a mission out of their head. So they became masters at putting stuff in these boxes, and these boxes went to a place called avoidance, where they just didn't have to deal with them because they had a mission at hand. The problem becomes when they don't open their master file and get and deal with something that has to be dealt with, and it stays in that box of avoidance. And it drove me crazy. It still drives me crazy. We have a box of avoidance. And it might be full of a whole lot of little boxes. And there are days, y'all, that I want to go to this toolbox of avoidance that he has and dump it all on the floor in the middle of the living room and say, now all your shit's mixed together. Can we handle something? Right? And if you don't, I'm going to Stacy's toolbox, which has hammers and screwdrivers and all the important things in life. Good morning, Sarah. And all the important things in life in it, like a normal toolbox is. And I'm going to pick up a hammer and we're going to start addressing these things. Well, then I sat back and I realized, I found my own crap in avoidance. I filed my own stuff in my box of avoidance. I don't want to deal with something because it's too much to handle today. So it goes in my box of avoidance. Okay? And we can't do that either. Yes, compartmentalizing and doing one thing at a time is incredibly important. You achieve more by doing that. But when we allow the stuff that affects both of us to sit in their compartmentalized box of their box, and then they file it in avoidance, and we have filed it in avoidance because we don't want to deal with it either, it just becomes something big. And I was talking to Jeremy, and Jeremy hasn't been on because they moved, and he was going back to get the last load. He's been doing it for like 3 days. And I said, Jeremy, the thing about moving out of a house, it's like whatever little bit of stuff you left gives birth to more stuff. And I think the same thing happens in our avoidance. When we file something in the box of avoidance and they file something in the box of avoidance, when it's in that box for whatever miraculous reason, it like explodes and gives birth to more avoidance. And the one issue you had that you avoided has now become 50 issues. So when we avoid things, we're not avoiding the one thing. We are avoiding something that evolves into something else, and then something else, and then something else. And now our little box that we put everything in and filed it in that avoidance drawer, right? It is now like ridiculously humongous, and it gives birth to something else. And I can remember when I was sitting at my desk at work, and I worked at a radio station, so we had all these people, and you have files that have to be done, and you have certain commercials that have to play at certain times. And I would go through the drawer after my bosses left, and I'd pull this pile back out, and I'm like, okay, now is the time to really get it organized. And I would go through and be like, ooh, what is this? I haven't done, this was like 3 months ago. So when you finally open that drawer of avoidance and your box of avoidance, you find stuff in the darn box that you haven't dealt with in forever because it's done given birth or been buried or done something. And now that one problem is now multiple problems. So yes, they use it as a tool. And it is a great tool to compartmentalize things. It is a fantastic tool to compartmentalize things. And we all need to learn that tool. It is a great tool. Any therapist will tell you that compartmentalizing is a great tool. And it is one of those things that we need to do in our life, in our organization. We talk about blocking out time on your day planner and creating time, that is basically the same thing. We're filing it there. But when you ignore it and when you leave it, it has time to grow and become something else. You know, those of us that will get this, how often do you put something in the refrigerator and so like you go in to get the creamer out, okay, and you look at this thing in the Tupperware and you're like, ooh, I really need to clean the fridge out, and you're like, oh, not today, and you close the door. Right, so the next day you come and you get your creamer out, you open the fridge, you're like, ooh, I really need to clean this fridge out, but not today, and you close the door. Then when you get ready to clean the fridge out, that food is like rotten, has grown mold, it is all fuzzy, it is disgusting, and now you have to deal with this disgusting mess because you didn't deal with it when you could have or should have in the very beginning. And that becomes our avoidance. We cannot continue to live in a life of avoidance. Are things overwhelming for them? Absolutely. Are things overwhelming for us? Absolutely. So make a list and tackle it one at a time, and you'll see that that starts to go away. If you have an issue, and Nakia talks about this when she talks about in her Ponder Points and her Stop and her Richard stories, one of the things they did is if they had an issue that came up and they couldn't resolve it right away, they stopped and took a time out, but they had to go back and address it again. And then they stopped and they took a time out and they had to go back and address it again. And until they could come to an agreement on the issue or agree to disagree. But they talked about that issue and it didn't get filed permanently in the box of avoidance. It got filed in the temporary file that says, here, you're going to go here, we're going to calm down, and then we're going to go back through our box. That made a huge difference because it didn't get to sit in the back of your refrigerator and grow mold and get fuzzy and smell bad. It all came out. So this avoidance toolbox that they utilize, we do too. We don't realize it sometimes, and it's hard to accept that we don't deal with things because we want to avoid them. There's a difference, and I've said this a lot. You know, we don't have to let people into our staticky stuff, and we have that right to say, no, I can't help you today. Or, no, I can't do this today. When you absolutely say, no, this is not something we're going to address and it's out of my scope of practice, it's something I can't handle, it's something I can't do, we have that right, okay? We totally have that right. But then it doesn't get filed in the box of avoidance. It gets filed in the box of stuff that has been done. If you say, I can't handle this, you're not bringing it back up later because that's like going through the trash. When you file it in the trash and you're done with it, you need to leave it there. Leave your trash in the trash. You don't go through the trash and pick out things and put them back in the fridge. To leave your trash in the trash. When you're done with an issue, leave it and move on. Because if you don't leave it and move on, then you take all these boxes of stuff you've addressed and you've resolved, okay? Whether you agree with the resolution, but you've resolved it. Whether he's right or you're right or whatever, you've resolved it. If you don't go ahead and file that in the done file, it just sits there in these boxes that you're now tripping over, okay? Yeah, Sonny, I'm with you. I avoid stuff because of my fears from a previous relationship. It's hard. That's part of unpacking your baggage. You have to unpack your baggage or check your baggage and let it go. Because if not, you're walking through life with your man, right? And you're walking through life in your relationship, but you're pulling 55 suitcases around with your past in them. Deal with your past and let's go. We can't live our life in fear, okay? Because you're ruining where you go. Yeah, we avoid it for fear of him running out the door. We do, but you still have to address it. Otherwise, you're walking on eggshells and it's creating a problem. And Stephanie, I know your man likes to run, right? So, girl, let him run, go for a run. And when they understand that you're still going to be there, and even if you set a time to re-avoid this, even if you to readdress this, it's not avoidance. It's not avoidance if you readdress it. There's some things they're not ready. There's some things they're not ready to address, but acknowledging that they're there is not the same thing as filing it in the box of avoidance. It's like filing it in the to-do file. Okay? It's filing it in the to-do file. So when you think about your life in these things, in like a filing system, they have everything that goes on in their life that they file in a box. We have stuff that we file in a box or leave stacked on my desk or whatever, right? We all have them. Then you have a to-do list, right? Things that you have to address. Things that are earth-shattering, gonna keep life and limb and big stuff, like things you have to make decisions on immediately, like, you know, paying the light bill and keeping the house and those kind of issues, or there's a date where something's going to expire and you're going to run out and you need to make sure it's done. That becomes an urgent to-do list. Then there are things that go in your to-do list that are down the road. They're kind of like your tickler file, and they just kind of sit down the road, and you can get to them when it's appropriate to get to them. Stephanie uses her Sunday check-ins, and I love that. They issues that they have that are not life-shattering, earth-changing today. You know, when her kid needed stitches, she couldn't put that on the Sunday list. She had to take the kid to the ER that day. Right, so that became an urgent deal. You couldn't avoid that until Sunday. But other issues can be addressed on Sundays for them, and that works for them. Nakia's stop, and we're going to get to it in 2 hours, works for hers. You know, and Nakia puts it in here that a good communication skill is learned skill by both. Sometimes it starts with a list of learning how to do so. And it is. You have to, I am a firm believer in making these lists. What is the biggest issue in our relationship today? What is the biggest thing in my personal relationship with me today that I have to fix or work on? Not fix, work on, because we evolve. If you think that you're going to come into this and like when I started with Carl and I went out on the porch that morning and I addressed one thing at a time, if I continued to do that our whole relationship, we'd still be on like item 4, okay? But once we got the ball rolling and we evolved to better communication, to better reading each other, and we evolved to that, we now talk at a totally different level. But it evolves, and it comes from learning one skill at a time, putting that into place and evolving. Because if you don't evolve, you're going to be exactly where you are 10 years down the road in the same situation. And we see it all the time. How many of us have been in other groups where they say, I have been here for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years and nothing has changed. If you've been stuck in the same place for 20 years and you're not happy and you're not communicating, that is as much on you as it is on them. Because if you're not willing to change, it's not going to happen. If you're not willing to change, it's not going to happen. It is called evolving and evolving together. And that's where we are. I mean, I know Michelle's on here, and I know from things, you know, she's had issues with her veteran, and they've worked through them. And now they're addressing some of the bigger issues. But they couldn't have addressed those issues on day one. Carl and I couldn't address some of our issues on day one into learning to communicate. Some of these issues weren't life-threatening, but they are life important, and we can address them today because we communicate better. And that's how it works. This evolution. So as you learn these skills and you put them into play, they evolve and they get better and better and better. And I'll give you an example. Y'all know that I'm like the holler, the yeller, and the spewer of venom. Right? I have not kept that a secret at all to anybody. So last night, I was tired. I didn't feel good. I had a stressful kind of day going on. I had a headache and I was starving. Right? So Carl, God love him, cooked dinner. And you know, we have veteran time and we have my time, and they're not the same time all the time. But because of me having surgery forever ago, I have to eat more often. Well, I didn't. And I laid on the couch and I told him my shoulders hurt. And so he started rubbing. He goes, well, there's no knot there. And I'm thinking, well, I didn't say there was a knot in my shoulders. I just said that this is what it was. Right? And we went in the kitchen and he was finishing up dinner. And I said I had a headache. And he said, well, I've had one for 3 days. And I just snapped. And I was like, okay, so you've had a headache for 3 days. Well, what? Again, I have them all the time. And it was like Stacy pitching a tantrum about a what about me moment. But you know what was interesting? I never raised my voice. He never raised his voice back. He just looked at me and said, I love you. And I understand. And put his arms around me, and we had dinner, and there wasn't a fight, and dinner didn't get cold, and nothing had to go in the microwave. And that was an evolution, because early on, dinner would have gotten cold, or it would have gotten slammed in the trash, or in the one day when we had a major explosion, the entire pizza ended up on the roof, on the ceiling. This is definitely put something that Mike avoided his communications of being unhappy for a year or two, and it all came out this past year, all at once, and totally shattered us, but now we rebuild. And you do, and you rebuild stronger. And you will be okay. You can do that. I look at where, you and Mike have been to where you and Mike are now. And it's amazing. Again, I'm a firm believer in our victories. We celebrate those victories. That's what we do. So my victory last night was I had a headache and was nauseous and didn't end up spewing venom. Yeah, and I was like, this is cool. We did it, and we didn't fight, and we didn't talk. And I look at some of the other issues that, when you run a business, and especially what we do here, you get a lot of static thrown at you at different times, and some things that are aggravating and whatever, and it just happens. It's just a fact of life. And early on when we did this, and I would say something to Carl about it, he would nut up. You hear me? I mean, like that. Now he's not like that. He has gotten very calm about a lot of things. And that is an evolution for us. That is a total evolution for us. And it makes me happy to see that we can continue to grow that way. Are there days I want to pop his little head off? Absolutely. You can ask Michelle, because I tell her every time it happens. Yes, there are days I want to pop his head off, but everybody does. That's a relationship. I go back to Nakia's Ponder Point and Richard in the perspective saying, oh, the snow is beautiful, and all Nakia really wanted was to take the snow and shove it up somebody's tail. Okay? But and at that point, she probably really wanted to look at him and say, are you effing kidding me? But she said, what? In the way she normally says it. And at that moment, she probably really wanted to pop his head off, but she didn't. And we all have our moments like that. But it's evolution. The fact that she could sit back and realize it was his perspective, I assure you, after talking to her 15 years ago, it wouldn't have happened that way. I assure you, 15 years ago, if he came out and go, oh, it's beautiful, she would have pushed him in the snowbank, okay? But she didn't this time. But it's evolution. It's how your relationship evolves together. And we evolve independently in our relationship with ourselves, and they evolve as they go through things, and then we evolve together. But it never happens if you keep everything filed in these boxes of avoidance. The best thing that ever happened to us, yes, Carl uses his toolbox, and yes, all of his little boxes end up in a box called avoidance, at least in my mind. But I have changed, and I have evolved, and I have stopped avoiding things that drove me crazy, and I have had to face my own mess on my own, things that I had to work on, and stop projecting and blaming everybody else for my own failures and my own shortfalls. And I had to go into my avoidance drawer and start pulling stuff out and say, ooh, this year I learned that there was stuff in my avoidance drawer that I had left there for 50 years. Can you imagine how dusty that was? 50 years I have let that sit in that drawer. And I sat back and I'm like, you gotta go past this. You might never have that relationship with that person that you want, but you can't continue to have that relationship with that person today because you're holding on to something that's 50 years old. And that was me learning to empty my own drawer of avoidance and unpacking those bags. You know, we're going to have a grandchild. I'm so excited. So my oldest son and then we're going to have a baby, and I'm so excited. I got the baby, you know, like the ultrasound pictures and whatever. And y'all know that I've been divorced for a while from my 28-year marriage. Well, we are going to share a grandchild. Okay, so we have some choices to make. I can avoid, right, having this grandchild together, and I can let this stuff that has just sat there and festered and not deal with it over that marriage. I can leave it in that drawer of avoidance, or I can pull it out and I can deal with it internally. Doesn't mean he has to deal with it. I have to. And I have to get rid of some hate and some anger and some resentment and some other things so that we together can be part of this child's life. Because we don't want this pawn relationship with our grandchild. You know, we want to share in that moment, and Carl will be there, and you know, all of us will be there. But we have to let that go and stop avoiding that issue, because that issue from that 28-year marriage, those issues, if I don't deal with them internally, are gonna affect my ongoing relationship with my son and my grandchild. So we have to pull our own stuff out, and we have to deal with that, because those issues that we carry, and they may not even be issues with our veteran. They may just be issues from past relationships, from past experiences, from ways we were treated, to the fact that we avoided becoming strong and creating a bubble, and we allowed all this stuff in. We've avoided that for so long that we have to address that and empty our own baggage of avoidance. And we need to stop avoiding things that hold us back. And when we do that, then we can tackle this box of avoidance that they have too. It's like the pot calling the kettle black. That's an old statement that we used to hear all the time. The pot can't call the kettle black. If you've got your stuff filed in your own boxes of avoidance, or in your drawer, or in your file cabinet, or on your shelf, wherever avoidance may be for you, and you don't address your issues, how can you be mad at your veteran for not addressing his issues? You have to do it too. Because there's not a double standard here. If you want this standard, this gold standard in your life, then you need to live up to this gold standard. And when you start doing it, they will start coming up, and you will see that the gold standards now meet Are there days that my gold standard is less than his? Absolutely. Are there days that his is less than mine? Absolutely. But we cannot sit here and put all of our stuff in an avoidance box and avoid talking to them, avoid dealing with our past, avoid the issues at hand because we want to make it easier. We can't do all that and expect them to pull their boxes out of their avoidance box. They can pull them out of there and let's stack them up and let's start opening those boxes one at a time. And you may not unpack that whole box that they have filed. You may only get an inch of the stuff out of there, and then it is time to put the lid on it and put it back. But at least you've addressed what's in the box. But you can't do that until you address what's in your own. Until you stop avoiding things too, and you need to unpack your own avoidance boxes. I didn't realize that. I'm telling you, the more I evolved and the more I addressed the issues that Carl had that drove me crazy, the explosions, the avoidance, the I'm in my head, the I don't want to talk about it, the pushing me away, okay? Those were all things that happened. But then I look back at me and I'm like, you're avoiding this. You're not dealing with this. You're shutting yourself down. You don't feel like handling this today. I was doing the exact same thing. And then I'm blaming the whole darn thing on PTSD. Yes, I have PTSD. Yes, he has PTSD. And yes, it's part of the issue in how their brain works and functions, and I get that. And I get that. But you realize that when we all live in our world of avoidance and I don't change to do what I'm asking him to do, that's like hypocritical as crap. If I want to see that change in him, I need to elicit that change in me first. So you got to unpack your own bags. You have to address your own avoidances. You have to look at your own faults. And when you do that, everything else is going to come into play. Sarah goes in here. In your mind, you can't think he's the one with the problem. He should change, not me. If you don't change, you won't be happy. And that is absolutely true. I'm not saying they're perfect because they're not, but I'm not perfect either. They don't handle a double standard and they see it. They don't handle a double standard and they see it. If you're not willing to do what you're asking them to do, then don't ask. So unpack your own bag of avoidance. It's important. Deal with your issues. Take all those boxes you've stuck in your avoidance drawer or your avoidance box and organize them into something that's handleable, that you can handle. Okay? Put them all there where you can handle them and prioritize them and say, I have to deal with this today. I'm going to put this in a file that I'm going to get to. Not in an avoidance file. Open the darn box and see what's in there and say, oh, I can address this right now. I can take care of this right this second. You know what? This other stuff is going to take some work and I'm just not ready to get there. But let me take part of it out and then I'll put the lid on it and then I'll go back to it. But you can't expect them to do it if you're not going to do it too. And avoiding triggers and avoiding stuff and walking on eggshells is never going to work. And a lot of that is caused when we walk on eggshells, it's because we want to avoid things too. I'm not saying going like a bull in a china shop, but I'm saying unpack your bags. Unpack your bags. It is important that we do that. It is critical that we learn to do that. And only then are you going to sit here and learn to grow a loving, lasting, healthy relationship. When you avoid things, you're not growing. When you avoid things, you're not growing. Yeah, and there is, except when you're doing the work and they are not and choose not to. And Leah, it does. It does. And there are some very rough times with that. But you know what? And your situation is, your story is amazing. And nobody has fought as much as you have for that. And now you guys are going in a path. But what has happened in the positive with whatever's gone on in your life, you have become a better person at learning to set your boundaries, and you are stronger, and you are not going to be walked over, and you're never going to be the victim again. So even though the outcome is not exactly what you wanted, the outcome now is that you're not going to be a victim ever again. And that's the positive in what's happened. And you are an amazing advocate for this whole thing. And it's important that we do that. So I'm running late, as usual. Let's Talk, it is now an event on the Loving My Veteran page. I did post that back in the group as well. So Let's Talk is tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You know we talk forever. So get your coffee, get your snacks. I got to figure out what my snacks are going to be. I get excited on Thursdays. I make my snack list for Let's Talk. Boone said if he had time, he would pop back on, and not to really talk about his book, but just to be part of the conversation with us. And I'm really excited. And next week's Let's Talk, we are having my very dear friend, Jeannie Lutz, on Mama Lutz, as we call her. She's going to talk about the effects of losing her child to suicide and some of that stuff. Honey, we are all a work in progress every single day, Leah. Every single day. So Jeannie Lutz is going to be on not this Thursday, but next Thursday's Let's Talk. And I am super excited because no woman I have ever met just has picked up from the ashes and made it a mission that 22 veterans a day is too many. And she is a massive advocate for that. Let's see. Stephanie, you did a great thing last night. Sorry I didn't watch it till later. It was great, and we appreciate you every single day for putting it out there. And I'll get with you and Sunny sometime today. Y'all have a blessed day. I'm Stacy. This has been Walking in My Shoes, and we are Loving My Veteran. I will talk to y'all tomorrow. Bye.